Me's cheating wife didn't come home from girls' night. I found what happened and filed for divorce. My wife told me she was sleeping at Layla's. She walked in at 8:50 the next morning, wearing yesterday's clothes and the most practiced calm I've ever seen on a person. She even asked if I wanted eggs. I said sure. While she was in the kitchen, I was looking at a bank notification on my phone. $340 at a hotel bar, 22 miles in the wrong direction. I didn't say anything. I took a screenshot. That screenshot was the first document in a folder that changed everything. She made the eggs well. That's the detail that stays with me, honestly. Scrambled, not too dry, with the hot sauce I like on the side. She set the plate down in front of me, poured herself coffee, and sat across the table like it was any other Sunday. I ate. She scrolled her phone. I watched her the way you watch something when you're trying to figure out if it's what it appears to be, which is a strange way to look at your wife of 3 years, but there it was. "How was Layla's?" I asked. "Good. We stayed up way too late." She didn't look up from her phone. "Mel brought that wine she's been obsessed with. You know how that goes." I did know how that went. I also knew that Mel had a 10 a.m. yoga certification thing on Saturdays, because Danielle had complained about it 2 weeks earlier when they were trying to schedule this exact girls' night. I didn't mention that. I said something like, "Sounds fun," and finished my eggs. After she showered, I went to the car. I have this habit, not a paranoid thing, just something I've done since we shared the vehicle more regularly, of noting the odometer when I park. I jotted it in my phone's notes app Thursday evening when I moved the car to street cleaning. The difference between Thursday's number and what I read Sunday morning was 44 miles more than a round trip to Layla's apartment would produce. I photographed the odometer. I added the photo to the screenshot of the bank notification. I went back inside and washed the breakfast dishes. This is the part people don't understand about finding out. There's this window right at the beginning where you know something and you're standing very still on the outside, and you have a choice about what to do with your hands. I chose dishes, then I chose my phone. I texted Layla. We weren't close. She was Danielle's friend first. But we'd exchanged numbers during the planning for a surprise party 2 years back and had texted occasionally since. I kept it simple. "Hey, hope Danielle made it home. Okay from yours." Friendly, routine, the kind of thing a husband might text. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then they stopped. Then they appeared again. Then, "What do you mean?" 2 words and a question mark. I read them 3 times. Then I took a screenshot of that too. I want to be clear about something. I am not by nature a dramatic person. I work in logistics. My job, stripped down to its core function, is making sure things that are supposed to be somewhere actually get there on time with the right documentation. I track problems early. I don't yell about delays. I find the bottleneck and address it. Danielle used to joke that I treated everything like a shipment issue. She wasn't wrong. So when I opened 8 months of joint account statements that afternoon, I wasn't spiraling. I was identifying a bottleneck. There were 22 transfers labeled DR Personal over those 8 months, ranging from 200 to 420, averaging around 310, each total just over $6,800. I remembered the one time I'd noticed and asked. She said it was a shared fund for Layla's bachelorette. The transfers continued 3 months after that bachelorette happened. I hadn't noticed because I wasn't looking. I was too busy not looking. I installed Venmo on my tablet. I'd never used it. And searched a name I found connected to 3 of the largest transfers when I cross-referenced the visible recipient tags on the statements. Ryan Fitch. Public profile picture of a guy standing in front of a new construction sign. Bio said, real estate. I didn't know him. I sat with that for a while. Then I remembered that Danielle had added me to Find My Friends 18 months ago. Her idea? She said it was because I traveled for work and she worried. I pulled it up. Her phone had been stationary at an address in Millbrook, which is a town 22 miles from our house, until 6:40 that morning. I screenshot the map with the timestamp. I did not confront her that night. I want to explain why, because it mattered. Confronting her that night would have given her information, that I knew, that I had looked, what I had found. It would have started a conversation I wasn't ready to finish. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a folder. I named it Records. I moved everything into it. Then I went to my contacts and found a number I'd saved 8 months earlier and never used. Dre had given it to me after his own divorce, offhand, the way you hand someone an umbrella in case it rains. Elena Cardoso, the contact read. Good attorney, fair. I left a voicemail asking for an appointment at her earliest availability. Danielle came to find me around 9 that evening. She stood in the doorway of the home office. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been quiet." "Just catching up on some stuff," I said. She leaned against the doorframe. "We should check in soon. Like, really check in. I think we've been kind of—" She paused. "Ship's passing." "Sure," I said. "When's good for you?" "I'll think about it." She pushed off the doorframe and went back down the hall. I turned back to the screen. The thing about her saying we should check in was that it would have been exactly what I wanted to hear 3 months earlier. I would have been relieved. I would have thought, okay, she sees it too. We're going to work on this. That night, watching the folder on my desktop with 4 screenshots and an odometer photo inside it, the words just sounded like something someone says before they need extra time to prepare their version of events. There was one more thing I found that night. I'd pulled a stack of mail from the side drawer. I have a habit of letting things pile up if they look like statements or notifications rather than anything urgent. And near the bottom was a letter from our credit union, postmarked 3 weeks earlier. I opened it. It was a notification confirming that a beneficiary had been added to a savings account I'd opened in 2018, before Danielle and I were even dating. The account held about $41,000, money I'd built slowly over 6 years, through overtime pay and 2 raises and the year I lived on almost nothing while paying off my student loans. I set the letter on the desk. I didn't open the credit union app to check the details yet. I just looked at the envelope for a moment, then set it next to the laptop. That letter sat at the edge of my vision while I listened to Danielle run water in the bathroom and watched the hallway light go dark under our bedroom door. I left it there. Some things you only open when you're ready to know what's inside them. I called Elena's office when they opened Monday morning and got an appointment for Wednesday. Elena Cardoso's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown, the kind of place with a waiting room that had good chairs and no magazines, which I appreciated. She was direct in a way I found immediately useful. She asked me what I had. I listed it. Bank notification, odometer record, Layla's text, find my friend's screenshot, 8 months of account statements with 22 flag transfers, a name on Venmo. She wrote things down without reacting much. Then she asked about assets. I told her about the house, joint mortgage, both names on the deed, purchased 18 months ago. I told her about the joint checking and savings accounts. Then I mentioned the credit union letter. She put her pen down. What exactly did the letter say? I pulled out the envelope. I'd finally opened it that morning in the parking garage before coming upstairs, sitting in my car with the engine off. The letter confirmed that a co-beneficiary had been added to my premarital savings account 6 months ago, Danielle's name. I hadn't authorized it. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known it was possible to do without my signature, but apparently there had been a form, and apparently someone had filled it out. Elena looked at the letter for a long moment. Get the full documentation from the credit union, in person. Request the original form, the date it was submitted, and any supporting identification used. She paused. Do you have records placing you somewhere else on that date? I didn't know the exact date yet, but I knew I traveled to Cincinnati for work every 6 to 8 weeks, and I had every hotel receipt, every work calendar entry going back 3 years, because I filed them for expense reimbursement. I can find out, I said. Good. She explained the mechanics, no-fault state, joint assets split roughly equally, premarital assets generally protected unless they had been commingled with marital funds. I had made 2 small automatic transfers into that savings account during our marriage. Habit, convenience. I hadn't thought about the legal weight of it. She said that was a real complication. Not insurmountable, but real. Anyone looking for leverage would find it there. I drove home. Danielle's car was gone. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened a new individual checking account at a bank where we had no shared history. I set up my direct deposit to route there, starting the following pay period. I did not stop contributing to the joint bills. I just stopped depositing my income into a place where it could move without my awareness. That evening, I drove to Dre's shop. He was under a Civic when I got there, and he rolled out, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at my face. He said, "Okay, how bad?" "Bad," I said. He nodded like he'd been waiting for this for a while, which he had. He'd told me twice in the past year that something felt off. Both times I'd said he was reading into things. He didn't bring that up now. He just said, "You eating?" I ate. "Good." He found a USB drive in a drawer, handed it to me, and said, "Make a copy of everything. I'll keep it here." I thought that was slightly overdramatic at the time. I made the copy anyway. The check-in conversation happened 4 days after girls' night. Danielle initiated it. She'd clearly thought about how she wanted to approach it, because she came in calm and measured, sitting across from me at the kitchen table with her hands folded the way she did when she was preparing to be reasonable. She said the marriage had been struggling for a long time. She said she'd been feeling alone in it. She said she hadn't been fully present either, which was as close as she got to saying anything at all. I waited until she finished. Then I said, "Is there something specific you want to tell me?" She held my gaze for a moment. "I think we need to figure out what we both actually want from this relationship." "Okay," I said. "Write me a list of what you want. I'll write one too." She said that wasn't what she meant, that she didn't want it to be transactional. I said, "I just thought written things were clearer, less room for misunderstanding." She said she'd think about it. She never wrote the list. I went to the credit union the following Thursday. The teller routed me to a branch manager who pulled the file after I explained what I was looking for. The form had been submitted in person 6 months earlier. The date was a Thursday. I pulled up my work calendar on my phone right there at the manager's desk. That Thursday, I had checked into a Marriott in Cincinnati at 4:18 p.m. I had a receipt. I had an email to my manager time-stamped that evening from the hotel's Wi-Fi. The manager looked at the form and then looked at my calendar without saying much. He made copies of everything and told me the credit union's compliance process would take 2 to 3 weeks. I texted Elena from the parking lot. "I was out of state when the form was submitted. Have documentation." She responded, "Good, come in Friday." I should explain what I thought I was feeling during all of this, because I wasn't feeling nothing. I want to be precise about it. There was a version of me still waiting for an explanation that made the math work out differently, still running alternate calculations. That version of me listened to an old voicemail from our second anniversary, Danielle calling from a work trip, laughing about something I'd said at dinner the night before, her voice easy and warm. And I sat with it for probably 4 minutes before I deleted it. Not because I was being cold, because I wasn't the person she'd been laughing with anymore, and holding on to the recording wasn't going to change that. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after girls' night. Elena filed the paperwork, and a process server delivered it to the house that morning while I was at work. Danielle called me at 11:14 a.m. I let it ring. She called again at 11:31. I watched the phone buzz on my desk and kept typing a shipment report. She texted, "You couldn't even talk to me first?" I typed back, "My attorney will be in touch with yours." That was the last direct message I sent her. What happened next arrived in fragments, the way these things do. Danielle had been telling a version of our story to the friend group for at least 6 weeks before girls' night. I pieced this together later from what Priya eventually told me, which wasn't much, but was enough. The version she'd been telling was about a husband who was emotionally absent, checked out, who had made her feel invisible for years. There was enough truth in the outline to make it land. I was quiet. I worked a lot. I didn't perform affection publicly. So, when she began framing it as a long, slow abandonment on my part, some people believed her, because it matched a surface version of me they already had. Priya posted a vague, supportive Instagram story. A mutual friend texted me, saying he'd heard things were really bad and that Danielle was struggling. I responded, "Thanks for checking in." I did not explain myself to anyone. I didn't have the energy to perform being misunderstood on top of everything else I was managing. The escalation I hadn't anticipated came from Danielle's attorney 3 weeks after the filing. Elena called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was in the work parking lot eating a sandwich, which is where I seem to do all my important phone calls now. Danielle's attorney had filed a response challenging the classification of my premarital savings account as separate property. The argument: I had made 2 automatic transfers into the account during our marriage, each one small but both pulling from joint income, commingling. If it held, she could claim up to half of $41,000 I had saved before I'd ever met her. I set the sandwich down. Elena walked me through it. The argument was legally legitimate, she said. Not a sure win for Danielle, but not frivolous either. Judges varied on commingling thresholds. We needed to establish the account's character as clearly premarital and demonstrate that the 2 transfers were incidental, not transformative. We had documentation of the account's origin. We had the fraud concern with the beneficiary form, which was still under review. But the commingling issue was a genuine vulnerability. I sat in the parking lot for a while after she hung up. Then I went back inside and finished the afternoon's shipment reports, because the trucks were not going to route themselves and I was not going to become useless on top of everything else. That evening, I found out, through Elena's routine financial discovery requests, that Danielle had contacted our joint bank 6 weeks after filing to attempt removing my name as primary account holder. The bank had told her both signatures were required and had logged the request. She'd left saying she'd come back with me. She never came back. But the request existed in the bank's records now, a time stamp and a note, one more thing that had quietly added itself to the file. The commingling argument was her strongest card. She was confident enough in it that her attorney's letter had a particular tone, not aggressive, just settled. The tone of someone who believes they already know how a thing is going to resolve. Reading it, I understood why. On paper, she had a legitimate claim. She had a husband who had quietly moved assets, who was unlikely to make a scene, who historically responded to pressure by going silent and eventually accommodating. She had known me for 5 years. She knew how I operated. What she didn't know was what was sitting in a discovery request that Elena had filed 2 weeks earlier, which included Danielle's email records as they related to the documented Venmo transfers. We were waiting on production. Danielle's attorney hadn't objected strenuously, which suggested they hadn't looked closely at what was in there. I went home that night to the house that was still both of ours on paper, made dinner, and went to bed. The commingling argument was real. Danielle appeared to be in a strong position. Her attorney's confidence was not unreasonable. I kept thinking about the email discovery production, arriving sometime in the next 2 weeks, and whether it would contain what I thought it might. The email production arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Elena called me at 4:52 p.m. I was in the middle of reviewing a routing manifest, and I remember setting it aside and thinking, from the way she said my name, that this was going to be one kind of call or another, and I needed to pay attention. "We got the production," she said. "There's something in here I want you to come see in person." I was in her office by 5:30. The hotel charge had already been formally confirmed through Discovery. The reservation at the hotel in Millbrook, made under Ryan Fitch's name, paid with Danielle's Visa card, check-in time matching her phone's location data from that night. That part I'd known was coming. The formal documentation of it still sat differently on paper than it had as a screenshot on my phone, but it wasn't the reason Elena had called. She turned her monitor toward me. She'd flagged a specific email in Danielle's draft folder. Never sent. Saved 7 months ago. 3 weeks before I had any idea anything was wrong. It was addressed to a family law attorney in the city. In it, Danielle had asked about asset division in a no-fault state. She'd asked what happened to premarital savings accounts when small deposits from joint income had been made into them during the marriage. She'd asked, specifically, whether initiating the divorce herself versus waiting for her husband to file would affect her claim on those assets. I read it twice. I looked up at Elena. "She was researching this 7 months ago," I said. "While the marriage was, by her own account, to friends and to our court filings, still something she was trying to save." Elena let that sit a moment. She never sent the email. She never deleted it. 7 months ago, Danielle had been telling me the distance between us was something we could work through. She'd suggested a weekend trip we never took. She'd brought home dinner one Friday night and said she missed us, which I had taken as genuine. I had been encouraged by it. I had told Dre things felt like they were shifting. He'd said that was good, and meant it. And I had believed what I was being shown, instead of looking at what was actually being built around me. I didn't say any of that to Elena. I just said, "What does this do to the commingling argument?" "It establishes that the commingling argument was premeditated," she said. "She was planning it before the affair was discovered, before the divorce was filed, while she was still presenting herself as a wife trying to fix a struggling marriage. Her own draft email undermines the premise that this is a reactive legal position." She paused. "I'm going to enjoy the settlement conference." The settlement conference was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I wore a plain gray shirt. I arrived 7 minutes early and sat in a chair outside the conference room and drank coffee from a paper cup, and did not rehearse anything because I wasn't going to be doing the talking. Danielle arrived with her attorney. She looked composed. She didn't look at me for the first few seconds, then she did, briefly the way you check a door to confirm it's closed. Her attorney had the posture of someone who'd come in to negotiate from a position of strength. He opened with the commingling argument, framed it as straightforward, said they were prepared to be reasonable about other assets in exchange for a fair recognition of Danielle's claim to the savings account. Elena said, "Before we address that, I'd like to walk through a few items from the Discovery production." She put the hotel reservation confirmation on the table first: the date, the name, the card used, the check-in time. Danielle's attorney had seen this already. His expression didn't change. Danielle's did slightly, a careful stillness around her eyes. Elena put the credit union's compliance finding on the table second. The beneficiary form submitted 6 months ago. The signature flagged as inconsistent with the account holder's documented signature on file. The date of submission cross-referenced with a Marriott receipt, a work calendar entry, and a time-stamped email placing Marcus Okafor in Cincinnati, Ohio. The credit union had completed its review the previous week. The account had been formally reverted to sole beneficiary status. The finding used the phrase, "signature does not match," and did not speculate further, which it didn't need to. Danielle's attorney asked to see the document. He read it carefully. He set it down and glanced at Danielle, and she looked at the table. Then Elena put the draft email on the table. She didn't say anything about it immediately. She let Danielle's attorney read it. He read it once, then read it again from the top. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms get quiet when someone is recalculating. He asked to take a short break to speak privately with his client. Elena said, "Of course." They were out for 11 minutes. I know because I checked my phone twice. When they came back, Danielle's attorney said they were withdrawing the commingling argument. He said they were also revising their spousal support request to a short-term transitional amount. He said they hoped we could reach a reasonable resolution on the remaining joint assets. Elena said we were open to that discussion. I straightened the paper cup on the table in front of me. That was the extent of my visible reaction. I was going for nothing theatrical, which wasn't difficult because I was mostly just tired. The specific tiredness of having carried something carefully for a long time and finally being allowed to set it down. The practical resolution was not dramatic. The house would be sold, the proceeds split after the mortgage balance. My share came out to roughly $38,000. The savings account, all $41,000 of it, remained mine, uncontested, which was the only thing I had genuinely needed. The Venmo transfers, $6,800 across 8 months, were absorbed through Danielle's reduced share of the joint accounts and furniture. Her attorney did not push back on this. I think the draft email had clarified to him what pushing back would cost. The credit union's fraud finding remained a separate civil matter. Elena had advised me not to pursue it criminally. She said it was disproportionate in time and cost relative to what I'd recover, and that the civil finding had already accomplished what I needed. The account was mine, the record existed, the conference had reflected it. I agreed without much deliberation. I didn't need her to face a criminal proceeding. I needed her to lose the thing she'd tried to take. Danielle called me 2 weeks after the settlement conference. Not screaming, not frantic. Quiet, actually, which surprised me. She said she knew I wouldn't believe her, but the marriage had been broken for a long time before any of this. She said she was sorry it ended this way. She said she hoped I could eventually get to a place where I understood where she'd been coming from. I held the phone for a moment. "I understand more than you think," I said, then, "Don't call again." I hung up. It wasn't a performance. There was genuinely nothing left on my end of the conversation. She had spent 7 months planning around me while telling me she missed us, and I had believed her, and the only honest thing left to say was that I knew that now. I'd said it. We were done. I blocked her number about an hour later, after I'd made tea and sat on the new couch for a while. Not immediately, which I think is accurate to how these things actually work. You don't always slam every door the second you're through it. Sometimes you close it quietly and then stand there for a minute. Priya messaged me about 3 weeks after the filing became common knowledge in the friend group. She didn't ask for details. She said she didn't know the whole story, and she was sorry. I said thanks. That was the whole exchange. Yvonne, Danielle's sister, had gone quiet the week the credit union finding circulated through the attorney correspondence. I haven't heard from her. I'm fine with that. The divorce finalized roughly 4 months after I filed. The house sold 6 weeks after that, a relatively clean transaction with no complications, because we'd kept up the maintenance and the market was reasonable. I used part of my proceeds for a down payment on a smaller place. 2 bedrooms, second floor, a parking spot that's actually mine. Dre helped me carry the new couch up the stairs, complaining the whole way about the angle of the landing, which was fair because the angle of the landing was genuinely terrible. The couch is good though. I picked it myself. That sounds like a small thing, but it didn't feel small. I still work in logistics. I still track things early. I still keep records by habit, expense receipts and odometer notes and downloaded statements going back further than anyone would ever think necessary. My manager once said I was the most organized person in the department, and I said thanks without explaining that it started as a personality trait and became something more specific and more useful than I ever expected it to be. On the first of every month, I open my banking app and check the savings account. It sits at $41,200 now, with a little interest accrued, unheroic math, the kind that accumulates slowly and without drama. The first time I checked it after everything was resolved, I sat with the number for a minute and thought about the Sunday morning Danielle made eggs, while a $340 hotel charge sat on my phone screen, about the practiced calm of her, about how I had said, sure, I'll have eggs, and taken a screenshot at the same time. I set the phone face down on the new couch, not because I was done thinking about it, because I was the one deciding when to stop.